Okay, I don't want to create a separate project every time, but I'm just going to add a few more pages to my existing project. But if you want, you can create a new project. I hope the NetBeans issue is resolved. Everybody has a NetBeans now running. And if you have a problem of seeing the page, for example, if I try to run this page or particular app, particular HTML page in browser, I need to make sure I select the browser in the second tab, not from the first one. It is depending on the plugin. So once I select my installed browser, I can hit run. That will make sure the very first page loaded, and in this case the registration page which I did before. uh, if you have issues are running the local host and some port number, you may go ahead and disable your proxy, because proxy may be pointing the local host to your infrastructure local host, so which may not be pointing your local host in such a way it is your PC. So in that case, you may temporarily need to disable the proxy to see the local host environment running. If not, if you don't want to see that, and you, of course, you can simply check where your project is created by right clicking, hitting on the properties, saying okay, in this case my project located in NetBeans projects DOM example or something like that. So if you go to that folder, and your project may be there, you may have a lot of projects here. In this public HTML, you will have your pages for the one which you created. Simply clicking it, open in the preferred browser and see that running directly. It is accessing through the file system, not through the hosted system. Uh, so far, we are not restricting anything like this particular app should run only on the server environment or the local environment. Server one mean it will be running through a server. NetBeans by default have a kind of a small, maybe a mini server which is used for running the HTML pages. It doesn't have any other capability like get or post. I don't know whether it will be supported, but our application does not require a host, so I can easily run from a file system as well. So if you have issues, you can easily overcome that. It is happening because of the infrastructure setting here being defined in that way. Otherwise, that's not a major issue at all. I'm going to create a new HTML page. I'm just trying to show you how I can save the data uh, using JavaScript, because JavaScript has the capability of storing some data, maybe limited data, but still that would be useful for us. I just give a name storage or something like that. So it always run the very first page. Maybe I can right click on NetBeans and try to run the specific file. That will make sure the particular file runs instead of hitting the run button on the top, which will always load the index file irrespective of any file which is opened. So you can right click on the file and click run file and make sure the particular file is running in the local host. So it's right now running, and I don't have much code. Here I'm not going to worry about my CSS because it's only for an example to retain the data. I'm going to keep a script tag. This for my what do you call, my JavaScript block. I'll have to do something UI. So we see. Testing the browser, it's always a tedious task. Sometimes the browser will work as we expected, will give a desired output. Sometimes it won't if you are switching between a different browsers. I'm maybe experiencing the issue right now. I mean, maybe in this example as well. I'm going to give I'm just trying to put input text field. I'm giving an ID. So my txt some name. Very simple. So something I'm going to type here. I'm going to hit save. So it gets saved. So for example, right now it is nothing going to be I don't because we don't have much code. If I refresh, things are going away because there is no storage engine attached. I can type something, but even though clicking save, once I refresh the page, everything goes away. But after adding the persistency, things won't go away. It will always be in there. So, maximize it. But remember, you can beautify your button or any block using CSS. I'd like to have some practice in place, so I'm trying to keep the CSS as much as possible. Remember, so far we only discussed very few tags, especially on uh, what I call the box-based design. Uh, Yesterday, I mean, last exercise we saw something for table. We added some designs, or maybe we added some definition for that. New tag, what we learned as last time, maybe the border type, border collapse, something we learned. So that will make sure merging the border, if it is more than one border which is colliding each other. Table would be very best place where to use that uh, border collapse. So make sure you use that whenever required. Okay, so I'm going to beautify the button a little bit. It's a tag selector, so the name of the tag itself. See, I'm going to do some sort of padding, slightly a bigger button, flat button. Maybe border radius, give some 5px. Slightly a curvy edges, and I may go ahead and add a background for that as well. Color of the font, white would be good if you are using a darker background. Nice. Maybe you can. It's pretty cool. There is a border is, I mean, curve is there, but it's not something visible. Okay. So you can, as much as coloring designing you can do using CSS. I want you to practice as much as possible with the various combination with various tags, so that you get used to the CSS where you can use a tag selector, where you can use a class selector, where you can use the ID selector. So if you have more than one component, similar component where you want a different look and feel for the same component. For example, I may have more than one button, but I don't want each button to look in red background on white text color. Instead of defining a tag selector that time, I may go ahead and add ID selectors, or maybe I may have a class selector to give a different look and feel for the button. But in this case, I have only one button, so I just went ahead and created that. The other one being the input text field itself. So I want to have a slightly a longer one instead of default size, maybe some 100 pixel. That itself smaller. Slightly a longer one. Maybe I can keep some height as well. It's too bigger. To match the size of a button, so I slightly made it bigger. placeholder will make sure give an idea about what kind of text it is. So type here to save something. Okay. If you want to give some sort of a padding, which is, I always don't prefer something touching the extreme border. I really want to give some indent spacing so that the indent will make sure that the user gets some sufficient space to type. So I'm going to do maybe padding left. I can give 10 px. This will make sure added some indent spacing for the particular input text field. So these are all the customization you can do, and of course all rules are same, but only difference what the selection of either a tag selector or class selector, maybe ID selector. It's up to you. Based on your requirement, you can decide how you want to keep the selectors. I felt this is a tag selector is more than enough because I have very less. I do not have much UI or input text field or button. Okay, but anyway, this is not something we wanted to see. And see, in this case, if I refresh, things are going away. I also installed my Firefox. If you notice, I try to refresh, this guy doesn't disappear. This may give you an illusion stating that as if your content is persisted, is saved. It is actually not. Some browser may have a different behavior of maintaining the content. If I refresh also, the content doesn't disappear. Only after hitting one more time the content goes away. So you should get used to it, because do not immediately come to a conclusion, okay, this is working in this way, so it will be working throughout all the browsers. Chances are there some browser may treat it slightly different, but thankfully we are going to do for mobile phones. We don't need to have this much of debugging ideas, but still the phone itself going to contain a different browser versions. Your Android phone is running the instance of a Chrome browser, and of course iPhones are running the instance of a Safari browser. And we are also getting a news that Firefox is also working on their own mobile operating system, but naturally it's going to contain a Firefox browser instance. And we have Windows Phone, of course that naturally comes with the Internet Explorer browser version. So chances are there sometime things won't work as we expect. So instead of having the believe on the refresh button, I'm going to click on the address bar one more time and I'm going to hit to make sure my content is clear. So the Firefox, okay, and of course the Chrome works as expected, because I'm very sure, because I haven't added any storage engine, so there is no point of saving any data here. Now I'm going to add a storage. So when the user click on save, the content gets saved. So what we are going to do, I'm going to write a function, because button has something to do with the action. So on save pressed, I told you my naming convention slightly maybe relevant to our default conventional logic of how the action methods are being specified in JavaScript. But I have only one recommendation: make sure the functions, if at all it is just a function, make sure it is always starts with the lowercase and follow the camel case. And that's a practice of what do you call object-oriented programming. So classes always start with uppercase and camel casing, and functions, uh, objects, everything starts with the lowercase and camel casing followed. Okay, so when the content is getting saved, we have three storage engines, I mean, added as far as in our learning syllabus concerned. One being local storage. I'll just comment it. Another, we have a session storage. These are all the single entity, mean it can save one single instance of a data. I mean single data. or maybe a string. It has a capability to store the string, and it will retain as long as the temporary data or any browser cache is not cleared. Uh, the major difference maybe between the local storage and the session storage. Local storage usually does not get cleared when page get closed, whereas the session storage only logs in the user data as long as the page is visible and open. When the page is closed, session storage also will get closed. The session storage could be useful if you are maintaining the user login state, so that user should be given access to a data only when user has issued the username and password. When the user closed the particular page, we can redirect the user to a login page again, making sure ask him to log in again. So those data slightly would be a temporary, or maybe will reside as long as the browser running in the foreground. Whereas local storage, it's a permanent, a kind of a permanent storage. Like once you save the content, it always remains. But of course, user can clear the data by clearing the history, cookies. There is a settings in all browser. There is option to clear the data. If he clears, of course, all the storage will go away. The third one being IndexedDB, but as per your document talks about WebSQL is deprecated, is not in the standard in the HTML5 draft. I have a IndexedDB, which is slightly a kind of complex storage, because it overcomes the issue of a session and local storage where it can save only string type data, whereas the IndexedDB can store a different type of data, and of course gives an option to query using standard query language SQL. That we will see later, because our application right now is not so complex to start with. But if we get into a complex scenario, we will see the third storage engine as well. But now we'll see what is local storage, because session storage is almost same. Okay. A local storage require a key so that a data could be mapped. For last example, we saw something about data types in JavaScript, whereas one of an object we created is a custom object we created, which has one side key and another side of value. So a key value pair which made our object. In the previous exercise, maybe if I have it open, let me see. I think it's pretty previous. I really don't know where I kept it. I hope it is. If you carefully watch it, I already incorporated local storage over there, but I didn't explain. But if you notice this part where I created a custom object, an object value was mapped to a key. Mean an object could be created by classifying what kind of data it is going to keep. A custom object. For example, for a student object, naturally a student name, roll numbers, a subject, marks are going to be the keys. And of course, subsequent value will change as the student record gets expanded. So a key is generic classification of your data, and of course, local storage is also going to contain a key to get or retrieve the data back, or of course assign the value to that as well. So I'm going to use the instance of a local storage. As I type local storage, hit control space, it automatically gave a suggestion stating a local storage. It is a predefined, pre-initialized data type, which is already there the moment you start running your JavaScript. I can easily see that as well, because this particular object starts with a lowercase letter and having a camel casing. It means any object having a lowercase, naturally it is an object, seems to be it is already pre-initialized and it is ready to use. For example, in this case, I'm going to make first name. It's a kind of a key. Any name should be unique. The one the user is going to type. So in this case, document get element by ID. We have ID called my text. The value what the user is going to type. the moment I assign something uh, to a local storage by defining a custom key, the local storage will check whether is there any value already exists with the key called first name. If not, it will create and assign the value, or if it is already there, it will replace the value. Maybe some values would be there. So then I'm going to say an alert stating that okay, save successfully, something like that, just to alert the user. And it is a good practice to clear the data. Okay, I don't want to clear the data because I just want to show it is permanently saved. First thing, the save press would be called as soon as user click on the button, like on click. When the user click on save button, the value would be stored in the local storage would with the key associated called first name. This key is user defined one. Depending on your requirement, you can create for the specific app. The local storage is a pre-initialized object which can contain or which can persist the data whenever you assign. When a local storage been accessed, it will check for the key which you assign whether it is already existing. If it is not existing, it will create a new key, assign the value what you give. If it is already existing, it will replace the value which is already been there. So that's it. So clearing a local storage, naturally it is also a same procedure. You simply make it as a blank, just get clear. The value is being set to a kind of a blank. So, but we'll see that why we need to do it. But as of now, I'm just going to keep it. So I'm going to run the code, and before that I'll have my debugging tools and everything open so that I can track. If you open your inspect element in Chrome, if you go to the tab called resources, you will see a left bar stating various storage engines, WebSQL, IndexedDB. Of course, I'm interested on the local storage. If you click on the mark and if you see it, I think it's a couple of storage are there which is I use for my previous exercise. I'll clear them off. I'll close that instead. Okay, so the key what you are going to create here will be listed here and the value. For your case, it should be empty because I was testing a couple of exercises and maybe I found some values. But if you are using local storage, right now it is empty. I'm going to assume I'm going to refresh or maybe going to hit for some time to make sure nothing is there. Okay, so it's being refreshed. Now I'm going to say name. I'm going to click save. The moment I click, of course I get a save successfully, and of course see if you notice the key which newly created and of course the value which is you typed has been assigned. It means a local storage initialized and of course the value being mapped to it. But we are not yet completed. If I refresh, things are going back and it's not there. But still I notice the key value exists, meaning my data is saved. But I should have some sort of mechanism to bring the data back to UI when the page is refreshed. But at least we are partially successful. We could save the data because I could verify that using my inspect element or control panel or maybe developer tool of your Chrome. Such a key created and the value being assigned, and of course the data is persisted. To make sure, I'm going to close the Chrome. I'm trying to open it again. Set URL to check whether it is still there or not. It's there. So the data is permanent. Even though if I close the browser, it doesn't go away. So the data is permanently saved. But all we need to do some sort of small mechanism to bring the data back. So let me try to do that. First point, when the page is loaded, I was talking about the JavaScript takes control only your all DOMs are fully loaded, then your JavaScript is ready to take over the control. So I need to detect whether my JavaScript is ready or it can take a control. As far as this particular block concerned, unless I press the button, no JavaScript code is called. Because this is how I've written, because I attached on click only when the user click on the button the JavaScript part runs. So before that the JavaScript is inactive, it is not running, and it doesn't need to know about the status of a DOM. But as our current requirement, when the page is fully loaded, the JavaScript check the local storage. If any value is there, take the value assigned to a particular DOM called myTXT having an ID should be added to that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write one more function. I'm going to make it as a init. Init is my own name, so it has nothing to do with the predefined function name. It's just trying to say initialize or something. I'm going to check. It's also a better practice to have a if first name exists. Then what I'm going to do, document value I'm going to assign. So this function should run after the DOM is fully loaded, so that it can, because the DOM is fully loaded, mean why I am talking in that sense. Any modern programming language or interpreter starts from top to bottom. The file reading option is always from top to bottom, end of file. So the DOM will be loaded as one by one. First DOM, HTML, head, title, one by one could be loaded. The script DOM will also be loaded, but after the script block only the body part gets loaded. Once it reaches the final DOM called HTML, then only I can conclude all DOMs are properly loaded. Then JavaScript can take control. Without loading entire DOM, if the JavaScript trying to take a control will produce a maybe a kind of a stupid response, because the obvious reason is the DOM which I'm trying to access, which is called myTXT, may not be there if a DOMs are fully not loaded, because the JavaScript depends on this particular DOM. So we have to make sure the DOM is fully loaded. There is one way to detect that action on onload, which you can add it to a body tag and call the init function. What it does mean, when body is fully loaded, then this particular method would be executed, and you don't have any function or anything to trigger the JavaScript. And we have various ways to do that also, but one of the easiest way would be adding an onload attribute value to a body tag or body DOM and assign a function. What it does mean, when the body is fully loaded or body is fully loaded, then the particular function would be called. When body is fully loaded, naturally the inner elements of this body would be ready. So safely the JavaScript can take over the control. So let me see what kind of response it does provide. Yeah. Once I refresh, it brought the data from a local storage and assigned to your input text field. It means when the body is fully loaded, JavaScript takes control, and JavaScript read the local storage and get the value from the local storage and give the value to a input text field, and now we see the value is printed in your browser. So when I refresh, nothing, and it doesn't go away, and of course it doesn't go away. I can go ahead and close my Chrome, and of course I try to open one more time. And from here I will always have my data, mean the data is currently saved, the data remains persisted. Limitation maybe it is not a short persisted one, because user can anytime go ahead and clear the data by, for example, he not necessary to come to inspect element. There is an option in all the browser, so settings, something clear data should be there, maybe somewhere. clear browsing data. Once the user clicks on every cookies on every elements will go away. So that time your data will also disappear. But still, it gives me a various flexibility. One, I could store the data without various initialization, because the local storage, which is a pre-initialized object available in our JavaScript engine, and assigning a custom key or kind of an object name, you can assign a value to it, and that value permanently gets saved. And I would like to verify that in what they call Firefox as well. So I'm going to run it on the Firefox. Yes, of course, initially nothing would be there because we haven't typed anything. Because in this case, Firefox is a different browser. It will have its own storage engine. Right click here on inspect element. I see slightly different. Maybe somewhere. Network, reload, performance, inspector, body, console. Should be somewhere, but okay, we don't want to waste the time here, but let me type some name. I'm going to save. It's saved. Now, if I hit, it remains. So it works in Firefox as well. Remember, this refresh won't work in Firefox most of the time, but maybe it's my Mac machine which is treating slightly different. Maybe it may work in your Windows machine, but it is better way to hit and make sure the URL is called freshly. So let me close the Firefox and try to run it again. Okay, the data is there. You can try the session storage and see what's the difference between the local storage and session storage. Similar technique you can use. All you need to simply modify instead of local storage to session storage for testing how the session storage works. Both will work in the same way, but the lifetime of a session storage would be shorter, but the lifetime of a local storage will be longer. For an obvious reason, you may try to open and close the browser, see whether the data gets retained in session storage or not. So it's up to you. Another limitation of being session or local storage, only the string type or maybe the number type could be saved, not a complex data type could be saved. So that's another problem here. But we have ways to overcome that issue as well. Assume you want to save an array. You want to save an array of JavaScript. Is there any way I can store in local storage? Perfectly, it's not possible. A JavaScript array cannot be saved, or JavaScript object cannot be saved in local storage, because I already told you, as single data it can take, maybe it could be a number or a string value. But I have some other way to overcome this issue. A JavaScript object or JavaScript array could be converted to a string type, and that could be saved in a local storage. And while we retrieve the value from the local storage, you can reconvert the data into an array, and then you can display it. So slightly different terminology we may need to use, but still that addresses the solution. So converting an array to a string type, maybe the next task we need to think, but that also gives me a flexibility to explain another concept called JSON. JSON is getting quite popular. It's kind of a data notation, object notation, mean object, the representing an object in a different form. As a corporate mobile application developer, you will be working, or maybe depending on this JavaScript object notation style like a JSON type, quite often. So I'm going to introduce that as well. You will be widely using the JSON object representation in web services or something to do with the remote server data synchronization when different platform is involved. Platform in this sense, it is a operating system, different operating system. We want to take the data between a different operating system. Right now, XML and JSON is widely used, and JSON is getting quite popular nowadays. Most of the REST or SOAP based web services are giving JSON, I'm sorry, not the SOAP based, but REST part It's always a JSON notation nowadays. And in my previous training program, when MFRP or your first project things were announced, almost all the projects, they gave a 15 project, almost in that 15, 14 project had a JSON and web service part had it. So it is appropriate to learn right away. I'm going to use the JSON in this case to convert a JavaScript object or JavaScript array to a JSON type. JSON type, what it is, maybe we can see that later, but I'm going to use that for my conversion so that it could be saved in a local storage or session storage. So in other words, maybe a JSON type is going to be like a string, because that's what internal understanding, because the first condition, a local storage can only store the string or single data type. And I already rejected JavaScript object or arrays cannot be saved. Then I claimed, okay, if I can convert the JavaScript array or object to a string type, it could be saved. Then I told, okay, I'm going to convert it to a JSON notation or JSON data representation. It means JSON representation is nothing but a string. So that's what we are going to see maybe after the break. So we'll also see saving the previous example, like the whole stuff, registration, which we did in the previous example. So this particular example or this app, I'm going to say app because it's highly relevant to say them as app because it's all individual pages. Right now, if I store the data, or maybe if I try to type display in table, when I refresh, data goes away. But I want to make it persistent. I'm going to deploy the local storage to persist the data. And of course, I have a various number of data because I have a set of data. So I may be using a JavaScript, what do you call, array, which could be converted into a JSON, then be used somewhere in the local storage. So that part we will see after the break. So make sure after that afternoon you can go ahead and test how things are working. Later, if you get time, we can move on to a jQuery the same day itself and see how I can replace the conventional practice of a JavaScript with jQuery, and I could end up creating a shorter code instead of writing a longer document, get element by ID and blah 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 stuff. Could be reduced into a simple set if we use a jQuery. That also we will see if we get a time. But today's task to learn about local storage, session storage. Okay, fine. It's almost 11:15. You can go for a break now.